there'd be a lot of poop in my pants. I've seen a 6-foot alligator go swinging through the air and slam into a tree.
These guys are the scientists of the supernatural, lecturers leaving lessons for inquiring laymen. They are applying the scientific method to a world that baffles science. They are the cryptids of the corn.
But who else has big black wings and red eyes?
Batman.
Oh, Mothman.
Oh yeah, Mothman.
A great white shark was stolen.
Oh, someone stole a shark?
I got stuff for you don't even know about.
She's a witch. She turned me into a newt.
Who knows? Anything could be possible. Anything could be possible.
It's really big abduction vibes.
Holy moly.
It sounds like you were abducted.
And it just stood up. I mean, it just like kept going and going. And she goes, what the?
Hello, and welcome back to Cryptids of the Corn podcast. I am the great and powerful Mystery.
And I am the coffee needing and enjoying right now, Jay.
And it is incredibly early this morning. This is the earliest we've ever recorded an episode.
I believe so, yes. This breaks a new record.
Yeah, it definitely does. But today we have a very, very special guest for you. This person has encountered a creature. This is one of the few ones I'd really want to see in my lifetime. Like in person, up close, and some of the best video evidence for this creature's existence. Mm-hmm. They are from very, very far away from Northwest Ohio.
Yeah, I'd say so, just a little bit.
But it's probably about the same. Probably the same temperature, everything like that. You know, I'm sure they get ice and stuff like that in Australia.
Just a different latitude.
All right. Please welcome our guest, Ashe. Hello, Ashe.
Hello, everybody.
I was worried it cut off there for a second.
Sorry about that. Hello, how are you?
Oh, we're living the dream.
Every day.
Yep. First, I want to start off by saying thank you for thinking of us to share this story. It's very special to us that people trust us with this stuff and want to talk to us about it. And you have a very, very awesome encounter with a lot of video evidence, which you don't get a lot.
Not very often. I mean, not of this.
Yeah, and then this is a very near and dear cryptid to our heart, or cryptid creature, whatever you want to call it. I think it's cryptid. I mean, by the technical definition.
Right, by that it is, but it might just be a common creature one day.
Yeah, it will be. But Ashe, if you'd be so kind, you can tell us a little bit about yourself if you'd like, and then we can get into your encounter.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for contacting me back, guys. And my name's Ashe, and I live in New South Wales, Australia. And this year I saw something in the sky that I can't explain and managed to get a bunch of videos which are apparently really good evidence. So I don't really know where to, I guess do I just like launch into the story? Or?
Yes, please. And then we'll just we'll let you talk, and then we'll kind of just discuss it together after.
Beautiful. Okay, well, pretty much I came home from work. I drove up to my back gate, to my front gate, sorry, and I looked out past my back gate. I live on 15 acres, and I have sort of a yard, and then behind it is some grassy area, about 15 acres, and then up the back is a tree line. And I sort of just pulled up on my gate, looked way up the back of the tree line, which is probably approximately 400 meters, maybe 300 meters or something like that, approximately away, and I saw what looked like an aeroplane coming directly towards me with a very, very bright headlight. That's what I thought at first. And I just watched it for a moment, and it kind of looked like it was slightly oblong in shape and slanted to a 45-degree angle. And so my brain in the initial seconds thought it's a very bright banking plane that's reflecting in the sky. The sun was setting behind it. And so I was just kind of waiting for it to bank around to the left. And it didn't. And it didn't. And so opened the gate and I've gone inside and I've kept watching. It was moving very, very slowly and seemed to be getting smaller. It was hard to see. I've whooped out my phone and I've taken the first couple of videos, and then I've gone upstairs and watched it disappear over the tree line. And at this point, I was perplexed because it really didn't look like a plane or anything else that I'd seen, but I didn't really know what it was. So I looked down for no more than a minute and sent those video or photo or something to my sister. And I was saying, oh, I don't know what this is. My sister, what am I seeing in the sky? And I've looked back up after that minute and I've seen it again, but this time it's either much closer or much larger and further to the right above the tree line. And in my exclamation, I've pulled out my phone again and started filming, and I'm talking in the videos to my sister saying, oh, it's come back. What the heck is this? This time I could see it much more clearly. It was bright white. It was oblong in shape. You could possibly call it a cigar, but it looked like it was made of some form of plasma almost. Mm-hmm. It pulsed with what looked to me a very water-like motion, kind of jellyfish-like, but also flame-like, kind of erratic, and especially at the tips, you could almost see discharges of energy coming off. You can kind of see that in the video, but obviously by eye it was a lot easier to see. Mm-hmm. And looking at this thing, and it's holding a perfect 45-degree angle, and kind of, again, my brain is trying to tell me it's a plane, like banking towards me or something, and it's going to turn, but it didn't. And it's just sort of very slowly drifted away and to the left, holding that 45-degree angle the entire time, pulsing, kind of alive looking, but unlike any animal I've really seen. I don't even know if I don't know what this would be, but it definitely gave an alive feeling. If it was a craft of some kind, it was definitely a biological craft of some kind. It was very strange, and I wigged out, and I sent those videos to my sister, and I started telling anybody that I met that I saw this weird thing and made them watch these videos, and no one seemed to be all that excited, and I was here just thinking, holy moly, like, so what was happening? And for the past, since then, this was in April this year, 20th of April this year, 2022, I've been looking at footage of planes and drones and atmospheric phenomena and high grazing comets. I looked up to see if there was any like comets passing or any, I don't know, maybe there was like a really low space station. I don't know. I was Googling my heart out, and I can't find anything that looks like this except for those weird jellyfish in the sky. That's my story.
Amazing. And if I'm not mistaken, your father had seen the same thing years before, correct?
Yes. So I spoke to my dad and I showed him the videos, and he said, because he grew up in Sydney when he was a teenager sort of thing, but he's originally from England. And he used to go camping out the back like of Lithgow and stuff over the Blue Mountains, which is sort of in between where I am and where the base of the mountains starts sort of thing, and up over the mountains behind Sydney. And he said that he's seen this thing probably up to a dozen times sort of thing over the years when he was camping, but very, very high up in the sky. And he said he always saw it at nighttime, and it looked like a star, but like a really elongated star. And he said occasionally it would seem to like move, but not fast and erratically, just sort of like twisting and changing that angle that it's holding.
That's pretty interesting that you both happen to have an encounter.
Yeah, he's had several sort of things.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's had a couple.
Right, yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I knew you were going to be excited for this one.
Kinda
she was messaging me.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. A lot more detail, yeah. 'Cause I had no detail. I saw the video, and yeah, it looks really good. And I mean, it's not a whole lot of detail you can see up close, but you can definitely see the object and the shape there. But just to see it in person, like the videos never do what your eyes do, like in person. It just never does it quite justice.
Yeah.
But so I understand, like seeing so much more extra detail in person.
Yeah. A couple questions.
Yeah, and I think also.
You go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because it was on a mobile phone as well. It was a Google Pixel 4, so it was a decent phone, but the sunset was behind it, sort of thing, and it was so bright. So, you know, like I have a pretty good camera, but it's still not good enough to deal with that kind of light, sort of thing. So I definitely got a lot. It looked a lot crisper by eye.
Oh yeah.
In the video, it is obviously a bit blurrier. But you can see in the video the pulsing off the edges that I mean, and in the video a lot of the time I'd managed to keep it fairly still because I had it pressed up against my window screen, which is why at times you can kind of see me trying to find a hole in my window screen to film through. But so most of the movement that you see, kind of how it sort of pulses outwards and elongates slightly and then gathers back together and little wisps come out of the ends.
Wow.
That was a lot more crisp to my eye, and I wouldn't call it like flames, if you know what I mean. It was a very like plasma, like charged ions coming off some plasma disc.
Yeah.
Or, I don't even know. Moving like kind of like a jellyfish. Yeah.
It definitely is moving like an organic creature. When you sent me the videos, that it really reminded me of kind of like a whale going by real slow, which is a common thing for this type of creature.
Right, yeah.
There's kind
It reminded me of a whale shark, actually.
Whale
if you
shark.
crossed a whale shark with like a manta ray and then smooshed it into like an oblong shape. Yeah.
That's 100% like what. That's why. So this goes into. There's one part of the video, and for everybody at home, when we publish this episode, I'll take the frame out so you can see it, where it looks like the creature is kind of turning on its side a little more, and you can see it kind of looks like a diamond shaped. So what I'm imagining is those are actually the fins showing itself off. Well, not the fins, the side flaps, but we call them fins for anatomy purposes.
Mm-hmm.
For the classic manta ray shaped flying UFO. And these, when I say manta ray, it's not like a manta ray as in the actual animal. It kind of has that body plan, but it's stretched out more. It's not like that straight, stingray shape. It's more like you took a manta ray and pulled it and stretched it out more like a cigar. But still the fins.
Yeah, the fins would have been like if it were, because I wouldn't say I saw fins by eye. So if it was, the fins would have been sort of coming straight at me, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was for the most of the video.
But at times it did appear to, sort of like bank. It held roughly a 45-degree angle most of the time, but it would sort of tilt and sway very slowly. But it was obviously heavy enough to not really be affected by like wind or anything like that.
Yeah.
What was also cool, I forgot to mention actually, is that when I first got home and saw this thing, there's a stunt plane guy that practices over the top of my property all the time. He does all sorts of crazy stunts, all loop-the-loops, and
cool.
he'll fly really fast up and then like sort of stall the engine and then like pretend to fall and then turn it back on.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, and I watch him all the time. Also, I'm near an airport that's being built. Right on my back fence, right where you see that thing flying over, is where a brand new airport's being built, right? And so I kind of know what planes look like. And at the time when I first saw that thing over on the left, when I came up to the gate, the stunt guy was actually flying. And I've been tempted to somehow try to track this guy down because he was pointing in the direction when I first saw it, like flying in it. And I'm just kind of half tempted to try to track this bloke down and ask, hey, like, did you see a big thing in the sky when you were practicing on April 20th?
Well, if he did, you got a number.
I haven't how to do that, so.
I'm sure if there's a will, there's a way. You will find his number, his contact.
I'll just manifest it. Maybe we'll just run into each other at the grocery store.
Exactly.
So, this is amazing. Thank you again. I already have notes to talk about with you.
Yeah, I have questions too.
No, shoot.
So, it's really cool because I'm assuming you didn't do a whole lot of deep dive into this the manta ray type living UFO. But you hit a lot of these markers with it.
Yeah, I just heard it, you guys talking about it. You guys were the first people I really heard speaking about, like, kind of living UFOs and, like, what if these could possibly be some sort of weird organic creature or or semi-organic thing. Because, like I said, it may not have even been a full creature. Might have been, I don't know. I don't know how to describe this thing. So continue asking.
I liked what you said earlier, though, how if it was a ship, it would be like an organic ship, which is an interesting thought.
Yeah, definitely. It's the moving like plasma. So we are under the belief that if these creatures are a part of our biosphere, so actually earthbound creatures, they're from here, just they've had a long time to develop into these amazingly unique shapes in the upper atmosphere. They would most likely be mostly gas-filled. So imagine if you had a jellyfish-type texture that was filled with gas, you'd get that quivering effect of the skin. It's like a half-inflated balloon in the wind. So you get quivers over the skin. And so fish's swim bladders, they can produce and discharge gas extremely fast to create buoyancy and to become negatively buoyant. So it's kind of like that, but on steroids, where you can kind of deflate yourself to dive down in the lower atmosphere to feed, and then when it's time to go up, you just keep making more gas. But that's one of the really cool things is the bioluminescence, or that light you've seen and your dad's seen.
Yeah.
So, the manta rays have been reported even in Australia, so I don't know, we haven't talked about this on the show, but I have them saved for future episodes. I may, at the end of this, tag in a story post-recording from another Australian story we have with this giant headlight. And these creatures have one of the big bioluminescent organs right in the front of their face, or what we'd assume is their face, with classic anatomy. And I think that's what you were seeing with that really bright light coming at you. And then, of course, your dad's seeing probably the whole creature lit up. What'd you say? I'm sorry?
And it was so bright, and I almost got the impression that it was not only glowing, but perhaps allowing light to pass through it and refract or something like that. Because the angle of the light wouldn't have been, for example, if it was a plane, the angle of light wouldn't have been reflecting so much back at me that it obscured the shape of a plane, if you know what I mean, because it was so bright. And I also thought, but it was a very bright sunset, as you can see in the video. Like, there's still quite a bit of light in the sky. So I don't know if only bioluminescence would be able to do that also. It's almost as if, like, how some organisms have like silica plates, and it's kind of like opalescent when they reflect light, almost like it was working something like that and just bursting with light. It was incredibly bright.
So that would be amazing too, the whole creature refracting light, and that could be the kind of the discharge point. But that, like you're saying, that would be amazing camouflage, especially in the open upper atmosphere. We talk about that a lot. Sorry.
I just had a brain thought just on the spot now.
Yeah.
But thinking about space travel, and they make light sails, and they can shoot light at these light sails and make very, very light crafts travel through space. Can you imagine if they had developed a mechanism to refract light within their bodies where they were actually propelling themselves with light?
Yeah, you're taking our job.
Yeah, that's a really great thought.
That is
super, so light, and their bodies are so, practically ether, so to speak, that they were able to propel themselves with light, and they could contract the surfaces that were moving the light around to move. And that's why they move so subtly and so slowly, because you got to be careful that you don't put your mirrors too far, otherwise you flip over or something. I don't know.
That's amazing. That is an incredible idea. That really is, because that would make. I mean, that's
so into rocks. So
but it's biologically sound.
Yeah, and it's low energy, but
yes. So that's what we talk about. These creatures have to have mostly low energy functions, just because even filter feeders do that. That's why we talk about it in the show. But that's why whales and whale sharks get so big, is to travel distances with using less energy, because they have such long periods of time where they're not eating. You need to be really efficient if you're a filter feeder.
And if you've had many years to develop.
Oh, yeah.
Or adapt to an ecosystem.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you got the bioluminescence. I'm not familiar very much with Australian geology, but are there any mountain ranges near you guys in this area?
Yeah, so I'm trying to like imagine which way I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So the way you're facing it was west, directly west. And if you were to continue a straight line, essentially from my back door onwards, west, you would hit the Blue Mountains.
I do know
It's
those.
very full. It's got all sorts of sandstone through it and some granite. But directly behind me would be a lot of like sandstone country and stuff like that. There is a lot of fossicking, quartz and stuff like that all up through those mountains. But yeah, a lot of mountainous ranges. There's all sorts of stories that come out of the Blue Mountains.
How far would
and
you
if
say?
you continue further west, oh, sorry, continue.
Sorry, how far would you say the Blue Mountains are from you, or where the sighting took place?
In a straight line, if you were to drive, sort of thing, you'd hit the foothills in about 45 minutes or something.
Okay.
You would
Really
be
close.
like, in the mountains. Yeah, so like fairly close sort of thing. I can't really like see them over my tree line sort of thing, but they're not very far away.
And the Blue Mountains is where your dad used to camp and see this, right?
Yeah, all up at a place called Lisco. He used to do a lot of camping all up through there. There's heaps of really beautiful places to camp out there, all sorts of cave systems and stuff like that. And there's also a place a little bit further out the back called the Pilliga, and it's got a lot of tales in it as well of Yowie and all of those cool
Yowie.
things.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. So you don't know this because this hasn't come out on our show yet, at least. But manta ray, the manta ray shaped UFO. I keep saying the manta rays because that's just kind of what we call them.
It's the group we put them in.
They are often only seen in areas that have mountains. And this is really amazing. And we kind of think, we have a theory, the reasoning for that. So the most upcharge of earthbound nutrients into the upper atmosphere is around mountain ranges. So basically you have these pillars of nutrients that are being pushed up. So if you're a filter feeder, you hang around where the food is coming into your mouth. You don't have to move. You don't have to work. You literally hang in these areas where there's these giant updrafts of food being pushed into your face. So that's amazing. I was like, I wonder if there's mountains close by. Not saying all these sightings of these manta rays are by mountains, but when we have these constant sightings like you have and your dad's had, it's almost always around mountain ranges. From South America to Australia to the U.S., both the Rockies and the Smokies here in the U.S., that's kind of our two really big mountain systems, have manta rays, a lot of them. And in the middle of the country is pretty bare for these sightings. But you get down by the Ozarks, which is another mountain range, like Louisiana, Arkansas, there's a lot there too. And so it's just kind of weird that, we that's what we feel, it's this nutrient uppour that is just attracting these creatures. It's like there's not very many whales in the open ocean, but when you get these big piles of food, you know you're going to have a lot of whales hanging out.
Yeah.
Now make the whale translucent. It gets a lot harder to find. So that's amazing.
I do have
Another thing that interested me that you guys were talking about were like fungi and stuff like that. That's another thing that I actually considered that these things could be. And maybe even more specifically, it could be some sort of really crazy lichen, which are actually just like fungi that have learned to farm algae and then created like their own perfect little ecosystem, essentially. And so this could be some super, super advanced version of algae or of a lichen rather, or a fungus that is also, because that would also make sense if it was able to use like prisms within its body to refract light. It would be able to like refract light right where its little algae farms are and feed its little algae farms, dip down by a mountain whenever it needed a drink and some extra stuff, go back up, keep farming its algae, and just do its thing.
You say all the right words.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because, it really could be. And so we talk about it all the time. 800. So you want to believe conventional carbon dating or fossil dating. 810 million years ago. That's about 400 million years before most other complex life formed. But 810 million years ago, we have mycelia network fossils super complex mycelial network fossils. So that's saying that fungi were already hyper advanced before anything else was more than slime. So they've had a long time to take all kinds of shape. And, you heard the episode. We talked about Bob. The biggest thing ever is a fungi, but they are on every continent, including Antarctica. They live in the ice. There's actual fungal species that live through the ice columns. They are all on thermal vents, and they are in the upper atmosphere. We actually have dozens of species we found so far in the upper atmosphere, so they're there. So now they've had the time, and they have the genetic ability to do this stuff. They've survived every mass extinction with little to no effect, as far as we could tell from the fossil record. Mm-hmm. They kind of just don't care. I mean, the ones that got hit by the asteroid cared,
yeah,
but the ones 100 miles away really didn't. So yeah, it really could be. And then you're saying with like the refraction of light, we have in the bioluminescence, some of the brightest bioluminescence on the ground or on the surface is from fungi, and we don't know why they produce bioluminescence. That's kind of the weird thing is for a creature that doesn't have eyes, or not a creature, a fungus, but I call them creatures, doesn't have eyes and doesn't seemingly have intelligence by conventional science. They produce bioluminescence. They seem to communicate. They have all these extra things. It's just like we just were on another show. It'll come out before this episode where we talked about it, where they seem to be at least some form of sentient, some fungi. They think, they talk to each other, they control plants. So if anybody's going to be these giant upper atmospheric creatures, it's going to be a fungus.
Mm-hmm.
Just
absolutely.
And then with you seeing it basically look like it's inhaling and discharging particles and stuff like that. So any creature that's filter feeding, which could still be a fungi or a jellyfish or, whatever, a lot of these creatures are pushing through automatically. It's hard to tell with whale sharks and basking sharks because they're pushing through the backside of their gills, so it's not like this big, long, drawn-out system. Whales are pushing out to the side of their mouth, but there are some more developed filter feeders in the open ocean, like some species of cone jelly and stuff like that are pushing all the way through their body to feed. And that's kind of what that motion reminded me of, is that they're taking what they want, and you're seeing the energy, discharge of whatever they're feeding on. And it could be nutrients, it could be, something we can't even ID yet.
Very well, yeah.
That does make sense, because if you think sort of on a microscopic scale and you think about certain organisms and they eat via sort of just absorbing things through their shell and then excreting the waste, it could work on a very similar level to that kind of thing, where it's just sort of like not even really sucking it in one end, but sort of just phasing through stuff, and as it moves, things just become part of it. It digests it, and then it just leaves it behind in its wake, kind of thing.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, trying to think, like, you ever seen like white blood cells and stuff under microscopes?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they do. But now you're talking about one that's more aerodynamic. And when we were talking, me and you, Ash, like the plasma rippling, how you were kind of explaining it, to me that really just sounded like an organic creature being manipulated by air. But, this is probably a really stretched out membrane over gas-filled sacs and digesting organs or organelles. We want to go, it's that simple to be organelles.
Right, yeah.
But it could be. So our biggest single-celled organism that we've ever found, and it was a fossil, so it's very rare to find a really soft-bodied creature as a fossil, but I believe it was about the size of a quarter. So before that, we didn't think they could ever be single-celled organisms. We didn't think they could ever be bigger than microscopic. And we have fossil evidence that suggests, and that was a really old fossil. I can't even think I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Is that just because things were bigger in the past?
That, or they were still competing then.
Okay.
Single-celled organisms don't compete in the macroverse very well unless you get into an environment that doesn't have a lot of competition, maybe like the upper atmosphere. But they were one of the first things on land until other stuff came on land, and then they didn't do well.
Gotcha. Interesting.
I don't know, Ash. This is amazing.
I do.
Yeah. Oh, my brain's going on all sorts of tangents now. So
you say whatever you'd like, because this has been a great conversation so far. You have amazing ideas. And you're the actually one that's seen it.
Oh, this I'm going into like way crazy speculation. Like
We like that.
now, my brain's just making videos now. But I started imagining sort of, because we started talking about macro and micro scales. My brain started thinking sort of about really big things and really small things, and kind of like about how this thing almost seemed to be like phasing as it moved along. It was really strange in the way that it moved, and I thought, well, can you imagine if sort of the universe was very, very fractal, and at times when dimensions kind of overlapped, imagine if what we were actually seeing was a single-celled organism from another dimension, sort of partially in our universe, and it actually is just a single cell taking in nutrients and then spitting it out the back end, and it's sort of half in our dimension for a little while, and I just managed to, we're totally off with the and it's actually just a single cell from a crazy another universe that's on a whole nother fractal scale, and it's massive, and to us it looks like the size of a bus, but it's just a single cell or something. That's the tangent my brain just went on.
I mean, that's not inaccurate.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's what a lot of these creatures, specifically these more jelly-like ones, or they look like they're made of jelly. They seem to act more like single-celled organisms or very simple organisms. There's actually jellyfish seen in the upper atmosphere, a lot of them. We're doing a whole nother episode in a couple months on it. We pulled some stories for that. Including the Chinese military getting in a fight with one. It did not go good for the jellyfish. They're very soft. What'd you say?
I said, holy moly, you'll have to show me that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did not go good for the jellyfish. They popped it.
Oh, no.
But another weird thing is you have an airport in your backyard. That's one thing I did not know before we started this episode. But me and Jay are working on this organic UFO stuff a lot currently. And there's kind of a weird other tie-in, like the mountains, with airports. I don't know what it is about them and airports. The sky snakes of India, they're almost exclusively seen on the airports. And they do not they chase planes and stuff like that. They kind of give an aggressive vibe, more like a predator. But like a lot of these manta rays are seen around airports or around bases. I don't know if they just like the planes or whether they think it's another one of them.
Yeah, if the activity draws them in, maybe.
Well, it's like another creature's flying, is that one of my kin?
Right, yeah.
Or is it a prey animal or,
something new in the area.
Yeah, and it could be a curiosity thing. So we talked about whales, so I love whales, but whale biology, humpback whales, adults, are very curious animals. They got out of the prey cycle very early. Megalodons, sure, we're still eating them, but that's why they develop really strong family units. So they were kind of a harder whale to target because there were so many of them in these giant pods that it would, it's a lot harder to pick one off. So they kind of got really curious because they weren't scared of anything. So imagine if you're this giant, I mean, how big do you think yours was?
It was so hard to tell because I didn't have anything to base it off, sort of thing. I've actually tried to figure out and sort of triangulate where I was sitting to where the tree line fell, and sort of guess roughly, but it would have to be at least the size of a bus, sort of thing. Absolutely, but probably much, much larger. It gave me the impression that it was very large and further in the distance. It wasn't hovering right above my tree line. It was quite far back, maybe even a kilometer back. This thing could have been 3 or 4 buses long and 2 or 3 tall or something.
Yeah. So that's kind of the hard thing with judging these creatures. Some of the pictures and videos we get, it's just because there's no comparison in the sky. So if it's, if it's 3 kilometers away, it's probably 200 feet long.
Right.
If it's half a kilometer away, it's probably that bus size you're talking about. So I think what you're saying, probably somewhere in the middle would probably be really accurate because it's large. You can definitely tell that with the way it's moving. It's large, and there's definitely mass there. But what I was saying with the whale thing, when it being big, is when you get big, most things stop eating you. So you just kind of get curious because you don't care anymore. Like African elephants, they got really big, and there was not many things even in the last ice age that could really mess with a family of African elephants. So that's why they got really intelligent. They got really curious. Even some of the other early pachyderms we don't think were nearly as intelligent as African elephants because they were still being eaten. So they're still more worried. They're focusing more on that mentally. So if you have these giant creatures that have evolved out of their own food system, their own ecosystem, their own food chain, they may be really curious, and that may be why they like airports. I really don't know, but they do like airports. There's definitely
it seems to be.
We've run into that connection way too many times to not be something. 3 times is a coincidence. 100 times is a connection,
A happening.
Yeah, because we have probably 300 or 400 of these stories we've kind of put together, and I'll bet you 25% of them have an airport involved or nearby, and then the rest, most of these bigger guys have the mountain ranges nearby.
Oh yeah.
The other thing with the mountain range, again, I left out is the upheaval to the upper atmosphere they produce. They basically create an elevator or an escalator back up to the upper atmosphere for these creatures, where I think they live most of their life. So whenever he or she's done feeding, they just got to fly over to the Blue Mountains, get on this air escalator, and go back up for little to no energy.
I can see that happening. At the moment, it's not an active airport. It's still in construction, but there is definitely there's an airport over in the city, and there's lines that run sort of along the mountains, plus that stunt guy who's always doing all of his crazy stuff.
The stunt guy, you still got to track him down.
He probably will tell you he's been playing with that thing for the last 40 years.
You should just make like a big, write out a big sign in your backyard in stones or something, just to draw his attention in.
Have you seen the sky jelly?
That's a great idea, actually, because I just have lots of grass in the big back part of my backyard, so I could just get the mower and I'll just mow into the grass.
Yeah, just like call.
If you've seen the jelly, call.
Right. Interested to talk.
You'll probably get the jelly in your yard.
Yeah, it'd be a crop circle show up.
Now, yeah, this is seriously, guys, I cannot wait at home. I cannot wait to show you these videos after this episode comes out, because this is probably the best evidence there is for these creatures' existence. And I still fully believe they are of this earth. I think they're just really undocumented upper atmospheric organics. So, Ash, we kind of went through it, and we kind of think they are hanging out between the 25 and... So this is miles. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with kilometers. This is between 25 and 45 miles up, and between the stratosphere and the mesosphere in the upper atmosphere is where I think they mostly hang out. And the reasons for this is it's warm in that little section, and there's a lot of liquid and gas water. So out of the whole upper atmosphere, once you get outside of the troposphere, which is what we live in, it's probably the only other place where there's a lot of water and it's warm. So I think these creatures aren't being seen a whole lot, because think of when they come down here, like sperm whales diving into the deep ocean to feed. They don't live down there. They don't hang out down there, for long periods of time, but that's where they eat. So that could be why you're seeing these creatures in the repeated areas, because it's a good feeding area, but they're actually living, 25, 30 miles above your head. Every once in a while, they dive down to feed and get warm, and then they go back up. That's really what I think is happening. I think you got extremely lucky, because you've seen it for a while, like a couple minutes at least, and you got clear footage.
I saw it for 20 minutes all up.
Oh my god!
And I think if it was probably more than 20 minutes, like I can actually send you the timestamps. I actually wrote it down somewhere, but I'll figure it out again, sort of, because from the moment I took the first video sort of thing, which was a couple of minutes after I got to the gate, to the last video, I think it was all up about 20, 25 minutes sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure it must have been, I either saw the same thing twice or it would have been two of them, because the first one that I saw, I watched it disappear, and it was moving so slow. I watched it disappear over the tree line to the far left. I looked down again for no more than a minute than it takes to open Snapchat and send a video, and then I looked back up, and then it was way, way closer, further to the right, way more crisp and stuff like that. So whether or not it was another one trailing behind, or it somehow was able to move very, very fast and sort of come back, you know what I mean? I think either way, it would have had to be either two or have moved very fast.
I wonder if it was two of them, because they do hang out together sometimes. From some of our stories, 2 or 3 of them are seen together, kind of like we talked about earlier with whale sharks and basking sharks. there might be 2 or 3 of them in a line together. And so I kind of wonder, we talk about convergent evolution, that similar niches produce similar creatures in behavior and shape, even though they're not related at all. Whatever these things are probably not related to sharks hardly whatsoever.
I would imagine.
I would imagine so, but who really knows? This world's crazy. These could be flying gelatinous sharks. That's a new take. But going to your dad's story, seeing the elongated living stars. So that's like the I'm going to assume is bioluminescence, because these creatures are reported to have extreme abilities with bioluminescence. But what did your dad think they were?
Dad's not a man to make conclusions, but he said, sorry, my cat just did a crazy jump.
Oh, it's okay. We have dogs.
But he essentially said that, yeah, dogs are awesome. Mine are out barking if you can hear them. Sorry about that.
No, Doug's in the other room whining, so it's all good.
Excellent. But Dad said essentially when he looked at the video, especially the more clear ones when I'm zooming in and you can really sort of see that sort of disc-ish shape, he said that's what he saw, but very, very high up, like way, way up in the sky. It looked like a star, but like very stretched out. Like it was very obviously not just like a star shining bright. He said it looked like maybe a bit closer than the stars, but like to him it just looked like a very long stretched out star. He just says that he has no idea what he saw, but it wasn't a star or anything regular. But he saw it a bunch of different times, sort of thing, all in a similar area, probably over the course of 10 years or so.
How many times do you think he's seen it? I know it's hard when you're talking about somebody else's story.
He said at least a dozen times, because he camping so often. Him and his mates go out in the bush and, do whatever they were doing. And he saw it a bunch throughout the years, sort of thing. He said at least a dozen times, a couple, like sometimes with other people, and other people had seen it. Other times he was camping solo and he'd just sort of look up and there'd be a star that was, very, just like it had been stretched out.
We need to plan a camping trip in Australia.
The Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
We just got a bunch of listeners in Australia and they want us to come. So maybe. I don't know. That's a big country to kind of tour.
Yeah, I know, right? That'd be cool to see one though.
If you come to Australia, I can show you some awesome campsites, and you're bound to see some strange things.
We're gonna die in Australia.
Yeah.
I'm bad with reptiles. I love reptiles, and Australia's got a lot of amazing reptiles that are also venomous. But I have a problem. I took venomous snake. Here's what we're famous for: off-topic stuff. Venomous snake handling in college and stuff like that. So I'm okay with venomous snakes. Like I don't normally like pick them up and stuff like that, but I love getting pictures.
Yeah.
So if they won't sit still, here you go. Sit still. But no, that's amazing. Maybe someday in the future, but we'd love that. But this is truly amazing, and I love what you said. So I was getting the impression from watching the videos that it was translucent, and that's why it kind of, if you at home when you see this video, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about, where it kind of looks like it disappears for a second, then reappears. I took that more as the creature is very translucent. So for a second, it just wasn't catching light or letting all the light pass through it, so you couldn't see it, and then when it turned a little bit, it would catch it. But the light refraction idea works very, really well with that too, that it's just, it's just actually like using kind of like a crystalline shape like you were talking about and transferring the light around it. And we talked about, it's weird, we've talked about that with Bigfoot.
Exactly, yeah. I was just going to say that.
That's interesting, like when you think about when you mention Bigfoot sort of using light to refract as well. Actually, I'd thought of that. I actually have a cat next to me, and I know that's a strange thing to say, but she has very, very interesting fur. I called her Coke because she's the color of Coke. If you put her in the shade, she's black, and if you put her in the sun, she's that sort of golden brown. Mm-hmm. But she
wrong kind of Coke I was thinking of.
Tense, and she can no, the other kind. But no, but she can sort of move and tense her fur in ways that she can either completely disappear into the dark, or she can turn bright red, and it's very much to do with the angle at which her fur sits when it's pointing at you. If it's very side on, then it can be either super, super black or super red, depending on, like the angle that she sits at. And so I actually looked really closely at her fur, and I think that it's because her fur is actually 3 different colors. At the very, very base, it's black. In the middle, it's got like a silver section, and then on the tips, it's got the red section. And it's almost like she can tense her muscles so subtly in certain ways that the hairs will point in the right directions and refract the light in the whatever way she wants to, so that if she was in the wild, she would be able to, you know, sort of appear more brown if she was up against a tree, for example, or if she wanted to sort of back into a tree hollow and blend in with the dark, she puffs out her fur and she just disappears and she's a pair of eyes. That could happen with Bigfoot as well. You know, theoretically, they could have some sort of coloration difference in their fur, and that it's something to do with the hollow hair or whatever that reflects light differently, and now they can just sort of tense in a certain way and really blend into a tree.
Yeah,
far more than you think. But she disappears.
We have stories of like these red Sasquatch walking through open clearings, getting into the shadows, and then slowly turning black and disappearing. And I think it's like they're actually using the muscles on their fur to kind of move and change and show a different color. So all of a sudden, like this red creature,
goosebumps.
Yeah. This red creature you're watching turns black and disappears into the shadows. Even though it's not actually disappearing, your brain was just trained to look for something bright red, and now it's not bright red anymore. So your brain really has trouble finding it. You know, if it's black and it's in the shadows, it doesn't exist anymore in your brain. That's amazing. I got a weird question for you before we get back to the living UFOs, since we got on Bigfoot. Do you think the Yowie and Bigfoot are the same creature or cousins or what?
I think they must be in the same way, you know, like all humans are cousins and we're all come from, you know, the same lineages and stuff like that, you know. So I'd say so. But that being said, our legends are quite different than the Bigfoot legends. And we actually have legends of 3 different kinds, depending on, because we have so many different cultures all throughout, so many different languages. Everyone has, you know, their own lore. And there's actually stories of a very small, a tall, and a very, very tall one. And they have different names depending on where you're from, sort of thing. I can't remember the name of the very small and the very tall one, unfortunately. There's a colloquial name which I personally don't like, but it's called a springjack for the small one. I think that's the name that the settlers gave to us. I don't really like to use it personally. Then there's the Yowie, which are kind of the middle guys. They're still very tall though, you know, 6, 7, 8.
More classic.
But then there's
Bigfoot.
a very, very tall one, which can apparently get up to, you know, like 12 foot or something like that. There are tales of those ones up north, I think. Don't hold me to that, but yeah. So they look very different as well when people draw pictures of the ones over in America versus the ones that we have here. In the same way that some people say they kind of reflect the native peoples of America somewhat in their looks. It's the same way in Australia, I think. When you look at the pictures, somewhat in their features they reflect the natives, and then other times they look totally different. But I think our creatures look different to yours, the way that people draw them anyway. They look like they would be different genetically, but definitely still related in the same. Yeah, like I think they've just isolated on Australia like our Aboriginals for such a long time, yeah, and they just evolved really differently like everything else did here.
You know, so it's kind of crazy because we kind of have the same 3. We have these things that people have been calling puck wedgies and other names throughout the U.S. of these tiny little hairy creatures. By tiny, I mean max, like 4 foot tall.
Yeah.
But there are stories of baby Bigfoot, and baby Bigfoot are like really thin. These puck wedgies, though, are kind of chunky.
They're thick.
Yeah, they're thick little boys. And then, you know, you have a classic Bigfoot that, you know, 6 to 8 foot tall, kind of, you know, you're very classic, like human kind of covered in hair, you know, but muscular. But we have these things what episode did we talk about the Mountain Kings?
The Mountain Kings?
Yeah.
Ooh, that was an earlier one, or kind of first season one, I believe.
So in mountain ranges here in the U.S., there are some stories of Sasquatch-like creatures that are almost more like trolls, but they get 12 to 14 to 15 feet tall. And there's a lot of stories of like Bigfoot harassing people, and then they hear a roar from up top the mountain,
And it stops.
and then everything stops. Whatever that thing is that lives on the top, when it says the fun and games are over, the fun and games are over. Famous Bigfoot researcher here in the States, Tom Shea, they call him Goliath. Well, they call their big guy in their area Goliath. And they have several recordings of like these Bigfoot harassed him, whooping all around him, stuff like that. And you just hear this loud, like a half mile away on the top of the mountain. And everything stops at night. Everything. I mean, even coyotes and stuff like that. So it's kind of weird. I don't know if it's like the last stage, like it's a hard stage for a Bigfoot to get to in their life cycle of these like what we call mountain kings, because they run everything. And right, Tom Shea and a couple others were talking about the mountain kings, that they don't really belong to maybe one or two of the families. They actually run like the whole area. So it may be a really hard life stage for a Sasquatch to get to, where they just kind of they move away from one family group and run a whole area and kind of keep it civil. But that's kind of cool. That I didn't know that about. I knew Australia had 2 types. I didn't know they had 3. So that's really neat.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard stories of all 3 types, but it depends, sort of which culture and what language you're talking. They have all sorts of different names for them and stuff like that. Yeah. I was told about the hairy men. That's what they were called from where I'm from, sort of thing. I was born a little bit further north, about 6 hours north of Sydney, and I used to spend a lot of time with the Aboriginal people there, and I'm lucky enough to have a godfather who's Aboriginal, and he told me a lot of awesome stories. And I used to run around, and when the sun started setting, that was my warning, like don't go back in the bush now that the sun is setting, because the hairy men might be there. And that was just kind of normal.
That's really awesome, though. One of my favorite documentaries I used to always just rewatch on YouTube was the Aboriginal documentary. It's just very interesting stuff.
I mean, the oldest written language.
That's just very unique.
The oldest language on the planet that's recorded is the Aborigines, with their cave language, the cave painting language. Where by that I mean it's very where somebody from that culture can still read it. I think it's 41,000 years, something like that.
That's pretty old.
Because the Aborigines have such a long history. I mean, and they were really good documenters. I don't think they get enough credit because, I mean, we know what kind of there was the the giant marsupial that looked more like a cow. They had a drawing of it, and they talked about it before they found fossil evidence of it. And they drew it like we think it anatomically looked and stuff like that because they seen it, and they just kept that history forever. I don't know. I just think it's amazing. Australia is an amazing country, continent, place.
Yeah.
It's a lot of long history.
A lot of history, yeah.
A lot of monsters, too, including flying jellyfish.
Yes. Add it to the list.
This has been
Currently so.
Anything else to add about your encounter? Because it was truly amazing.
Only that I encourage everyone to watch all of the videos that these guys release, and to keep in mind that in any video that it looks further away, that was the first time I saw it. In any video that looks obviously closer and you can really clearly see that slanted oblong shape, that's the second time that it came back. And I don't know, keep looking up, everybody.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Ash, we want to thank you for your time. This has been truly amazing. We are very honored you chose us to share this with. This is very near and dear to our hearts. As far as I know, we're one of the few people that are actively doing research and talking about these creatures. And it is just truly an honor to have a firsthand encounter shared with us. So we want to thank you again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem. If you guys have any more questions, just let me know, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. All right, so before we go here in a second, we have we have a famous thing where we'll all say bye together on the count of 3. We do it as loud as you can without blowing out your speaker on your phone. So if you're ready, we'll do that.
Sounds good to me.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Cryptids of the Corn podcast.
Please share with a friend you think would like us. It's the best way to help our show grow.
Leave a comment, rate us, a 5-star review, and remember, there is always extra content on Patreon/CryptidsOfTheCorn.com.
And don't forget, stay magical.